pianists and teachers and colleagues and friends. Today we're talking about how to teach the Invention in A minor, that's number 13 by Johann Sebastian Bach, and of course it sounds like this. This is part 2 in a 2-video series. Last week I covered basic concerns about how to learn this piece, how to help your student learn this piece accurately and effectively and efficiently. And today I'm going to cover more concerns around how to play this to the best of your students' ability, how to make this sound musical or expressive, as well as how to play it reliably under pressure. Now, I do have a free download of 30 practice techniques to help your students be invincible under pressure. These are all practice techniques when you're getting ready for a performance. So if you're interested in that, please click the link in the description, or you can click right up there to see the video about that particular free resource that I have. It's great for teachers trying to help their students improve their performance ability and just be more reliable under pressure. And we're going to talk about some of those things in this video. Okay, so at this point, your student has learned this piece. He or she is able to play it generally, accurately, maybe a little bit under their performance tempo. So let's talk about performance tempo. I advocate for a performance tempo on this piece around 100 or a little bit lower if your student is not able to quite play accurately at 100. If you go listen to Glenn Gould play this, he plays it way faster than that. And if you listen to most students play this, they will play it faster than that. There's something about the exciting, that 16th note starting on the 1E, which gets them very, very excited to play this. And it's so motor rhythmic that it can easily just increase in speed, accelerate throughout your performance. Again, when you're performing and your adrenaline starts pumping through your body, it's also very common to start a piece faster than you plan to start it. So we do need to address this with our students right away. When my students are preparing for performance with a piece like this, I oftentimes give them 3 metronome marks to practice with. One of them is the performance tempo that we're aiming for. So let's say your student is planning to play this at 100, then that's one of the speeds they will practice at. But I also give them a very slow tempo, and I tell them it's going to be painfully slow. And that might be something like 50 for the quarter note on this piece. If it's very difficult to play at 50, they can translate that to the 8th note and play at 100. We know that we want to feel this in the quarter note, not in the 8th note. We want to feel it in 4. But yes, of course, if they need help and they want to play it with the 8th note at 100, that's fine. Just make sure they're translating that correctly and playing at the 8th note. You know, not at the quarter note again. And then I find a speed that's about halfway in there. So whatever piece your student is playing, give them a performance tempo, give them a dreadfully slow tempo, and then split the difference in half, and that's their medium tempo. And ask them to play the whole piece or sections of the piece every day at all 3. It's important to break our students out of the habit of only playing fast or only playing at their performance tempo. Playing slow, it's not the solution to every problem, but it does wake you up and it shows you problems that you didn't know you had when you were only playing fast. Another practice technique for helping this to stay steady is to feel the backbeat. And any jazz musicians know that when you're playing swing rhythm, you actually feel the and. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. You feel that backbeat, and that helps it really swing in its groove and sit there. So if you have a student who's repeatedly rushing through this, you can encourage them to listen to the 4th 16th note of every group. So if I take a place towards the end, let's start at measure 23. I'm going to be listening for the 1 E and da, 2 E and da, 1. So like this. You would not want to perform it this way. I would never accent these notes in performance. This is a practice technique. Other things to do to break them out of a fast tempo might be playing all staccato, playing with rhythms like so the tempo alone is a concern here, and you have to give your students very specific instructions on very specific practice techniques to keep them from just playing at tempo all of the time at home. All right, so let's talk about a few other practice tips that your students can use, particularly in the weeks leading up to a performance, to make this very reliable. If your student is memorizing, there are a lot of things that they can do to secure their memory and not just play and hope for the best as they go. First of all, I mentioned analyzing the chord harmony when we were talking about how to learn this, and I would continue to do that to make sure they understand what key they're in. Secondly, you need to have jump spots, places, section beginnings where your student knows they can go to. And I would probably have about 5 jump spots that are natural places to begin. One example of this is the middle of measure 6, where the left hand starts in C major. Another example of this is the beginning of measure 14. And you could start that actually with the end of measure 13 if you want, with this arpeggio. That's another great place, and you can find a few more like that. Then, when your student is playing for you in the lesson, warn them that you're going to do this so they're not surprised and shocked. But you can say, okay, I want you to play, and if I say jump, you have to jump right away to the very next starting point. And then test them on this and see if they can do it. You can try it first with the score up in front of them, so that if they need to look up and quickly find it, they can. But then you want to try this without the music on the rack, so that they're practicing thinking, I'm in measure 3, my next jump spot is measure 6. Okay, go right there. And I would encourage them to practice going to that very next jump spot. Another thing you can do, particularly in a 2-voice contrapuntal work like an Invention, is to ghost one hand, meaning you pretend to play it on the keys, but you're not making any sound, and play the other one. Difficult, and you notice I didn't do it perfectly when I just demonstrated that for you. I had a few notes that didn't really sound. But if you can do that from memory, then that's really helping you to hear each hand and think about what both are doing, as opposed to just playing entirely with muscle memory that you've built up. Now, with motor rhythmic pieces like this, it can start to be where you feel like you've gotten on a train that's speeding down the track and you don't have any time to actually breathe. So sometimes in pieces, particularly Bach, that runs fast like this, I like to plan places to inhale and exhale and make sure that my students are actually breathing while they play. If we were singers or played a wind instrument, of course we would know where we were going to breathe, and pianists don't literally have to breathe in order to keep playing, but it is very helpful to release tension throughout a motor rhythmic piece by just planning where you want to breathe. It's actually most helpful to plan where you want to exhale, because as soon as you exhale, you will automatically inhale right after that. So maybe there's some of those section breaks where you want to just plan to exhale and then inhale as you begin the next section. Or maybe you have a really intricate spot. I'm thinking of maybe measures 11 and 12, which are quite intricate, that you want to have your student plan to exhale in the middle, and then they will naturally inhale, and that will release some of the tension that they've built up within that intricate place. All right, as far as developing character and playing this expressively, I think it's really important that our students have some idea of what the character is that they want to express. So I'm going to ask you, what character do you think this piece is? What's an adjective that describes it to you? I can think of a few. I think it's very exciting. In some places it's a little bit mysterious. In some places it's intense. It sounds a little bit like scurrying along, or something almost machine-like that's a little motor that's kind of running. So your student, if you have a very imaginative student, you can have them write a whole story or develop multiple characters. At the very least, have them have a few ideas of adjectives that describe the beginning, as well as maybe a few other key points. The other thing to do, now I'm looking at this in my Henley text. So one other thing that's really important to do is to plan some dynamics. Just because Bach did not write dynamics does not mean we need to play without them. If you are using a good student edition, such as the Alfred Masterworks done by Willard Palmer, then there will be ideas in there for what dynamics you should use. But if you're using an text, or even if you are using a student edition, you have license to actually change those dynamics or come up with your own ideas. So the way I like to approach this with my students is to have 2 ways of shaping. Number 1, micro shaping, where I shape the individual lines. So that main subject, I feel like has kind of a traditional up and down, a peak sort of in the middle. And that kind of goes with the actual pitch contour of that subject. But then I also like to think about macro shaping. So not the little micro shapes, but the macro shape. Where is the peak of this entire movement? Does it have two peaks? I do find in a lot of Bach pieces that fit on 2 pages, there's typically a peak towards the bottom of the first page, and then there's another peak in the second page. One of the best ways to think about this is, where is the harmony most intense? That's probably going to be the biggest peak for you. And then where does it resolve? That's going to come down a little bit. But again, this is a personal choice, so I'd love for you to think about what you think is most intense in this, as well as work with your students on that. And then lastly, to make this really expressive, I think it's important to know which hand, which voice you are primarily listening to in any moment. When I was working on this recently with a student, we were going back to the idea that this is very conversational, or it sounds like the 2 voices are interrupting each other. So what I would really like to hear at the beginning is more right hand followed by more left hand. I'm going to exaggerate that at slow tempo. Exactly like I did, but hopefully you heard them talking back and forth and the main subject material coming out more than the accompanimental material in any given moment. Students will need to practice slowly to get these kinds of things, and they'll also need to stop and check in with themselves. Am I listening right now? Did I hear what I want to hear? One other really important practice technique to use in any piece like this that's motorrhythmic and in anything by Bach is to practice starting at random measures. I do have a short video about using a number randomizer app, and I always recommend that with anything remotely like this. So if we have 25 measures in this piece, you simply choose anything between 2 and 24, and you have to start at that random place. So you take a look up at it. Okay, start there. It forces your brain to really think about where you are in the piece. If you want to take that to the next level, since this is in common time, I would try doing that also starting on beat 3 in the middle of the measure. So again, you just say, okay, I'm going to start at any random measure, but I'm going to always begin at beat 3. So if the randomizer gives you 19, then you start in the middle of 19, which happens to be this. And you see how it goes, starting there and moving on to the end of the section or to the end of the whole piece. All right, I hope that gives you a few ideas on how to make this really fun, fantastic Bach invention reliable under pressure, as well as help your student play it expressively. I unfortunately hear a lot of students in exams and festivals play their Baroque pieces like finger exercises without much expression, and I think that's a terrible tragedy. So hopefully I've given you a little help on how to help your student play this expressively and to enjoy playing it and not just make it a finger exercise. If you have questions about this piece or other pieces you'd like me to cover in a YouTube video, please leave a comment below. Check out all the resources in the description of this video, and I wish you all the best in your teaching and playing.